Ben Gunn, a former prisoner who had earned respect within the jail, found freedom but still wished to remain, as he valued his standing there. This shock reveals a deeper truth about human life, as meaning is more dependent on rank and belonging than on comfort. We do not merely seek company, we crave esteem, usefulness, and proof that our place matters. The book argues that life functions like a status game, with rules deeply embedded in human social existence. Once accepted into any group, people interpret praise, disrespect, advantage, and loss with intense emotional force. These feelings appear moral and personal, but often reflect changes in social standing. Ben Gunn rebuilt himself by studying, helping prisoners, and becoming valuable within a prison hierarchy that once oppressed him. When release threatened his world, the loss was both practical and existential, as his status would vanish. The following sections explore why connection, symbols, rules, conflict, and modern platforms make this pattern feel inescapable. These tensions are discussed in the book The Status Game by Storr, and I invite you to subscribe to the channel for deeper insights into your own status and how it shapes your life decisions. Humans survive through groups, so connection is not just a decoration, but a fundamental part of how safety and flourishing are organised. Acceptance brings protection, while exclusion signals to the brain that support, resources, and recognition may be disappearing. Research shows that respect from others is linked to well-being, with lower social rank associated with worse health outcomes. The book follows evidence from civil servants and baboons to demonstrate how hierarchy shapes stress, illness, and mortality. Isolation distorts perception, making others seem harsher, colder, and more rejecting than they might be. This spiral can lead to bitterness, self-harm, and retreat, as disconnection changes both expectations and behaviour. Connection alone is insufficient, as people desire not just tolerance but value, influence, and acknowledgement. We seek to get along and get ahead because we need to feel valued and recognised. When status drops sharply, despair can intensify, as people interpret the fall as proof of failing life itself. From this perspective, status appears less as vanity and more as a social nutrient that people are built to need. We seldom feel like players because our minds tell a heroic story about who we are and why we act. Beneath that story, however, the brain constantly scores our social life through symbols that signal rank and worth. A watch, a title, a logo, a posture, or a passing glance can all become status information. The book describes a status detection system that reads cues with remarkable speed and surprising precision. People infer competence from clothing, track deference in conversation, and notice tiny differences in symbolic advantage. Even children fight over possessions and prefer relative advantage, showing how early contest mode appears. Money and power matter, partly because they function as status symbols within shared social imagination. The point is not that objects possess magic, but that groups imbue them with social meaning. That is why giant yams, office pens, orange juice, and handbags can all become serious business. When status is sensed through symbols rather than fixed scoreboards, people remain alert to comparison almost constantly. Symbols function only when groups agree on what is admirable, shameful, proper, and ridiculous. Some rules emerge from long human evolution, such as helping family, returning favours, and respecting property. Others are cultural and local, influencing how people talk, cue, praise, defer, joke, and display belonging. The book uses pub etiquette to illustrate how invisible rules organise behaviour without formal announcements. People follow these rules automatically, feeling discomfort or contempt when someone violates them in public. Different cultures can reward different forms of play, with some praising uniqueness and others conformity. Because these rules are learned early, they sink beneath awareness and start to feel like reality itself. They not only guide action, but also build the self by teaching what kind of person wins. Change the rules, and the same human machinery can produce very different ideals of dignity and success. Status games therefore shape character, not only by rewarding behaviour, but by defining what behaviour even means. Across the book, status tends to emerge through three recurring roots: success, virtue, and dominance. Success games reward competence and usefulness. Virtue games reward moral conformity, and dominance games extract deference through fear. In real life, these roots rarely separate cleanly, as most groups combine performance, ethics, and coercive pressure in varying proportions. Companies promote talent, advertise values, and compete with rivals, while religions teach duty, honour insiders, and police dissent. These mixtures matter because people often confuse one route for another and use force in the guise of moral language. When the balance shifts, behaviour changes too, as every game distributes esteem according to its own design. A harsher workplace can breed rivalry, while a moralised movement can turn active belief into a badge of rank. The same person may seek admiration for skill in one setting and for purity in another. Understanding this mixture helps explain why even civilised institutions can still slide toward cruelty, grandiosity, or obsession. This mix appears everywhere, and you might find it useful to subscribe to the channel for more ways to decode everyday hierarchies. Status injuries become particularly dangerous when humiliation, grievance, and a fragile identity combine in someone already feeling cornered. Dominance games do not wait for free admiration. Instead, they seize rank through intimidation, threats, and pain. This pattern is evident in violence driven more by disrespect and damaged standing than by material need. The book describes how many killers explain their assaults by claiming that someone disrespected them or their people. Humiliation can thus become combustible when a person sees restored rank as the only route to dignity. Male grievance receives special attention because physical aggression and status contests still cluster heavily among men. Elliot Rodger illustrates another form, transforming wounded entitlement into a grandiose fantasy where cruelty is seen as justice. He had briefly felt value within an online game, but then lost that refuge as his resentment intensified. The warning is not that hurt people always become violent, but that status pain can warp moral vision. When humiliation meets a dream of special destiny, the result can become one of the game's most lethal forms. Groups do not only seek rank, they also protect the beliefs and symbols that define their world. When a belief becomes sacred, questioning it can feel like an attack on identity, not just disagreement. This is why moral panics, mobs, and ideological crusades can grow with such frightening sincerity. The book shows how games reward active belief, making commitment itself a ladder of status within the group. People then earn admiration by enforcing orthodoxy, hunting enemies, and dramatizing loyalty in public. Social life becomes distorted as insiders see themselves as righteous, while rivals appear dangerous, stupid, or corrupt. The same bias appears in small experiments, where children favor arbitrary shirt colors and adults excuse their own side. Large systems repeat this process with religion, nationhood, class, and political identity, often under stories of virtue. When games compete, sneering at rivals can raise status at home even while truth gets thinner. Status games turn most savage when belonging, and belief fuse so completely that doubt itself feels like betrayal. Modern institutions expanded status play far beyond village scale, making it easier to trigger and harder to escape such comparisons. Success games fostered innovation, wealth, and individual rights, but they also extended hierarchy into vast systems. The book traces how modernity elevated merit, self-improvement, and professional achievement as key routes to esteem. This shift brought gains, especially the idea that people should rise based on what they do, not who they are. However, large success games also make rank feel endlessly visible, as performance and symbols circulate far beyond local communities. Neoliberal culture intensifies this pressure by treating personal worth as a competitive project measured through visible achievement. Perfectionism grows in such an environment as people start imagining constant judgment from colleagues, audiences, and abstract markets. Older communal games also weaken, leaving fewer places where ordinary belonging can offset professional comparison. The result is a more anxious player who may have enough materially but still feels behind socially. When fairness erodes within these large games, resentment grows as people sense the contest is no longer honestly run. Social media intensifies the status game by combining public judgment with unpredictable rewards and endless opportunities to compare. The book argues that these platforms work like slot machines, except the payoff is not coins but social rank. Every post invites measurement through likes, replies, followers, and visibility. While nobody knows the outcome in advance, that uncertainty makes checking compulsive because each contribution could raise or lower standing before a watching crowd. Platforms also preserve status, invisible counters, badges, and elite attention that can exceed offline standing. For some users, those symbols become too precious to surrender because they hold accumulated recognition and access. These systems also reward outrage, belief performance, and public conflict, giving warriors powerful incentives to keep fighting. Follower gains, pylons, and verification markers can turn moral display into a very efficient status strategy. The problem is not only distraction, but the way platforms harden sacred beliefs and speed status contagion. When status becomes instantly measurable and endlessly variable, people keep pulling the lever long after the game is hurting them. The final challenge is not to entirely escape status, as human life has never operated that way. The true task is to choose games carefully and reject stories that make cruelty, obsession, or delusion seem noble. Good games reward values, cooperation, competence, and fairness, rather than humiliation, panic, or ritualized contempt. They also provide space for identity beyond any single hierarchy, which protects individuals when one ranking falls. The book continually returns to the danger of treating sacred beliefs or elite symbols as unquestionable truth. A wiser player notices comparisons, suspects status intoxication, and examines whether a game genuinely improves lives beyond its own tribe. This stance does not eliminate ambition, but can keep it tied to usefulness rather than grandiosity. It also helps explain why freedom without meaning can feel empty, while service within a decent game can stabilize life. What truly matters is not avoiding status, but seeking forms of status that make people more valuable to one another. If these ideas help you choose better games, they may inspire you to subscribe to the channel for more careful readings of behavior.